Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dogworks. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com. You can support this podcast on patreon.com/First Paw Media. From First Paw Media, sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company, this is the Dog Driver Show. Visit our website at dogworksradio.com. Now here are your hosts, Robert Fortow and Kourosh Partow.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert Fortow and you're listening to the Dog Driver Podcast. And I am here with my co-host Kourosh Partow. And today we're turning the tables a bit and I am going to interview him. KP, how's it going?
Doing excellent. This season is behind us, and actually it's snowing today here in Alaska, but spring is ahead of us, right?
It is ahead of us, yeah. I can't believe that we have 3 or 4 inches of new snow at home. I guess it's time to get the sleds back out. What do you think?
I didn't store my sleds yet, so I think I'm going to take them out this afternoon or tomorrow. Days are long now, so we can go after work, definitely.
So, KP, I don't think we've ever interviewed you on the show, so let's let our listeners learn a little bit about you. First off, tell us how you got started in mushing and, a little bit of background.
I am probably one of those guys that I call myself dinosaurs in the sport. I've been doing this since 1987 in France. Actually, we had a Siberian Husky, like a ton of people that we talked and interviewed in the past. We started with one Siberian Husky in Paris. Actually, we lived, and the dog was out of control, too energetic. So we joined a sled dog club, CUCN. In France, and went to a couple of dryland races, saw the bike tour events, and back then we didn't have scooters, so it was bikes without chain, BMX bikes. So I started to race bike tour, actually, or bike tour without chain, and did well in a few races, and then we bought a second Siberian Husky, and then I started to run with a sled that we had to borrow. We didn't have money to buy one back then, and went to the Alps and with friends and practiced a few times and raced a couple of times and got the bug, and the third dog and the fourth dog and the fifth dog, and before you know it's just you're involved in it full blast. Then we moved from Europe to United States in the early 90s, and started with Alaskan Huskies. We lived in Wisconsin for a few years, and from there we at that point we were doing mushing as a major part of our lives, and moved to Alaska, the Mecca, to race sled dogs, and slowly changed from Alaskan Huskies to dogs we imported from Norway, and introduced those lines into our lines, and raced limited 4 and 6 and 8 for years, and touched some of the GSPs, did some of the experimental breedings with Desert Hound Salukis. And before you know, we're running Rendezvous and Onak and Open Class, and here you are.
Here we are many years later. KP, you said you started in 1987, and I know a little bit of this story, so I'm going to ask you a couple questions that I don't know. What brought you to France, and before that, what was your association with dogs growing up, and where did you grow up as a young man?
I did all my schooling and everything in France, and so we lived in France when we had the dogs, and not really. I mean, my grandparents, they had German Shorthairs, but they were not sports dogs. They were they were hunting dogs, basically. They were not for bike touring or ski touring like that. And in France, quite honestly, the Siberian Husky was just because it was cool. It was Nordic. I was fascinated by Jack London movies and Jack London's books as a child, and it was a novelty. And never planned to be a musher at all. It was a breed I loved, and they're beautiful dogs, Siberian Huskies. Mine didn't have blue eyes. It was just all white and had brown eyes. His name was Crimson. And that was the part of it. It was not planned like some of the people we interviewed, in their family as a musher or as friends as musher. We had nothing to do with sled dog sport.
So, KP, I don't know if you know this, but I got my first Siberian in 1987 as well. His name was Axel from Guns N' Roses. That was very popular back then. And, I was just fascinated by that breed. It has an allure to it like a lot of other dogs don't. A lot of our Alaskans today, whether they're sprint dogs or even the mixes that we see, just look like a dog. They don't have any real special characteristics, but I think a lot of people are drawn to this sport because of that allure of what a husky looks like, right?
Oh, definitely. We've interviewed hundreds of people in our interviews last 3 years who started with Siberian Huskies, including myself. A lot of friends in Europe. I have tons of old friends from Belgium, Germany, France, and Norway, and a lot of those guys, they started with Siberian Huskies because, as a matter of fact, back then, when I started, you were not allowed to run mixed breed dogs. You had to have a purebred, pedigreed dog to be considered a sled dog. And we had Siberian Huskies, Alaskan Malamutes, Samoyeds, and the Greenland dogs. And that created a massive chaos, at least in France, because we had two federations back then, FISTEC and FFPT, I think, FFPT, and one of them was for purebred dogs and one for mixed bred dogs, and nobody could stand each other, right? Because we all dog mushers, and it took years for mixed breed Alaskans, Eurohounds, GSPs, Greysters to be included in the sled dog sport as whole over there.
So in the late 80s, early 90s, about the time you were moving over to the States, that was sort of the crest of sprint mushing back then. All the old school guys had started retiring out at that point, and then we had all of a sudden a resurgence, especially when a lot of the Europeans really got involved with racing over here. How did that progress in your eyes, and how did that change your focus a little bit?
Well, when we moved from Europe to the U.S., we actually placed and rehomed all our Siberian Huskies in Europe. A lot of them went to Germany and Belgium and France, and we came with absolutely no dogs. And first thing I did when I got here to the U.S. was go to a sled dog race. And I recall it was a race in Wisconsin, Bowler, Wisconsin. And we had no dogs and stopped by there, coming fresh off the boat, right? And looking at the sled dogs there, looking at the Alaskans. I was familiar with dogs, of course, and my focus back then was running the 4-dog class. So I was looking the style of dog that I would like, and I approached several of the American mushers, Stu Osthoff back then, Mike Marsh, and Kieslings, Millers, Chisicks and Mumfords back then, of course, who are our partners for years, and gathered some dogs, and it was impressive because coming from Europe and coming with the Midwest circuit, you would see different stuff, different style of dogs, different techniques, different races, different style of racing, and it was a kind of a quick learning experience for us, how to run, how to perform. And then after a couple of years in Wisconsin, we started to actually fly our dogs to Alaska. And that's how we ended up in Alaska. We'd fly, we had a sponsorship by Delta Airline, go to Chicago, crate 8 dogs or 4 dogs or whatever, and bring them up to Fairbanks. And would race North Pole, Eielson, North American Championship, of course, and sometimes Gold Run. We would stay probably like 3-4 weeks and race there. My first experience in Fairbanks was, that's what you're talking about. That was when the Mecca, we came from Europe to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin to Fairbanks, running LNAC, Limited North American Championship. That was the biggest race in sled dog sport in limited class. Teams, super competitive teams, very, very difficult to finish in top 5 or top 10 even. And to win it was just a big, big, big event if you win it. And you would see 40, 50, 60 teams in each class, and teams coming from Europe, from lower 48, Canada, Alaska, of course, Scandinavia. And I believe the first world championship we had in Fairbanks, and it was out of this world, right? You see 200 teams, trucks, people, different cultures, different languages, different dogs, different equipment, all gathering, and it was fun. Everybody would stay at a Comfort Inn, which was by China, and every morning you had 20 dog trucks around the hotel, and we all had breakfast together. You had people from anyone from Rudy Roperts and Wolf, Bochoven, Thomas Warner, Brigitte Naas, Boysons, everybody, they were all together, just gathering. It was fun. It would keep you push and push and push to be at the level of those champions, because you are hanging out with champions, and you want to be a champion, and you put more and more effort into it. They were the heydays, I call them.
So if you got started in 87, moved over to the States a little bit later, when was this sort of heyday that you're talking about? Was it the late 90s, early 2000s?
Mid 90s, all the way till early 2000s. Then you have the influence of the European teams, Eurohounds. Egil Ellis was here, and he was dominating, crushing the competition here, and that was when we started to import dogs from Norway. I contacted Asbjørn Erdal Aas from Lillehammer, and stayed with him for a couple of weeks out there. Met Thomas Warner, Birgitte Naas, Uli Petter Engli through him, and did a combination. We imported, I believe, 10 different bloodlines from everything you can think of. The Laban lines, the GSP lines, the older lines that they had in Europe, and that was the start of our program with Kenan Lori-Chizik and Christian Tavo from France, and we put all our efforts together and introduce all those lines into our Alaskan lines that we had back then, to be able to compete with the Eurohounds coming straight from Scandinavia and Europe.
So now here we are, second decade of the century, and you're doing quite well in Alaska. You win a lot of races up here with your dogs, and you've run North American and Rondi. You recently switched over to open class just a few years ago, if my understanding. Again, just a progression. What made you switch? We've seen the Siberians, and you went to Alaskans, and you went from 4-dog, now you're into open. How did you make that switch, and when did that happen?
I raced 4-dog class for years, and I loved it because it's very physical, it's very explosive, and it is very intense. And then 4 and 6 was my thing, and for years and years. And one night we had a bunch of friends, actually, Egil Ellis and Helen Lundberg. They were here. We were all having dinner with a bunch of friends, and Helen tells me, she's like, why don't you run 8? You've been winning 4 and 6 for years. Why don't you do 8? It's only 2 miles further. And I thought about it. I was like, why not? We decided to run 8, and we had a very, very competitive 8-dog class team for years, and they called them Super 8s because we won every single race. We won 19 races and championships in a row without having any defeats, non-stop winning. And we get to a point that, honestly, for myself, winning is fun, but you need a new challenge. I needed to get my ass kicked by the big guys and learn a little bit more to get up in the morning and have fire in the belly and go and work with the dogs. And that's when we decided to touch the open class. And so I didn't have a lot of choice. I took my limited class dogs. They were doing 22 miles an hour average the year before, and they were picking at 23, 24 miles an hour at max speed and bringing them down all the way down to 18 miles an hour, 17 miles an hour, 16 miles an hour, running Rondi and Onak, or not Onak, but Rondi mainly. And so we did few short open classes with them, Eagle River Classic, Montana Creek, Azure Championship, and I said to my kennel partner, Ken Chizek, I said, I'm going to do Rondi this year. And he's like, oh, all right. And he's a Rondi champion, 2012 Rondi champion. So he gave me a lot of, tricks, I guess, keep him, on a pace. And we ran Rondi with a very small team.
What year was that?
His first year was 4 years ago.
2018.
2018, yeah. Small team, and we had 14 dogs in the yard and took 12 and ran Rendezvous, and God, that was an eye-opening experience. First day we were first, which surprised the heck out of myself, by 1 second ahead of Buddy Streeper, which is, I will take it all day long, even one day to be ahead of his team. And then the second day, hell broke loose. We crashed and burned on coming up Cordova. We didn't have enough depth to make it well. And we hung in there. Actually, the third day, I went out with 8 dogs only and finished 5th. Rookie of the year. A lot of people, they told me, that's phenomenal. You did great. And that was a good starting point to get motivated to say, hey, I want to be a contender. I don't want to be a participant. And the year after, we did Onak, again with a small pool of dogs, and finished also top 5. And that was the beginning of it. It's a lot of hard work, though. This year I did a few limited class races, and 8-dog class, 10-dog class, and you finish and you're like, this is a piece of cake compared to running and going 2 hours around the trail and having all the extra work and extra time and energy that you have to spend on the trail. So that was the reason going from the limited 8-dog class and 10-dog class to open, just to be able to push myself and stay in the sport longer and stay motivated.
So, KP, I have just a couple of more questions before we go. The next question is, as we mentioned, you've been at the top here for a long time. At least since I've known you, you've been winning a lot of races here. And I think you and I have known each other for 6 or 7 years now. But we talk to a lot of people all over the world, and you've said that you have to keep the fire in your belly. So humbly, I'm going to ask, what would it take you to be at that level somewhere else other than Alaska? Again, say going to Europe or somewhere else. Could you do what you do here in Alaska there? Yes or no?
I think so. I think champions, I don't call myself a champion. I said champions in general. They can find ways to perform in different environments and in different with different challenges. You have to just fine-tune and learn what you are competing against and who you are competing against. We actually were planning to go to Europe and run the World Championship last few years, but its logistics are becoming so enormously difficult for a bigger kennel to go there, to take 12 dogs or so. 4 dogs, 2 dogs, it's not that bad. You can have them as luggage basically when you're traveling. But when you're talking about carrying 12 dogs, it's a big feat now. And going back to Europe, luckily, I know how to train for Europe. I know the terrain. I know it's, what it takes to have a winning team. My style of dogs are not the best well-suited right now for going and winning races like Norway Trail probably, because they're not very big. In Alaska, we are pure speed, right? That's our game. Our game is the speed game. Our trails are fast. Our trails are flat majority of the time. There are curvy sometime, but it's not unusual to see, 20 miles an hour, 21, 22 average in competitive teams. When you talk about 36 kilometer or 37 kilometer average or 38 kilometer average in Europe, it's not comprehensible. It's extremely fast, and I'm telling you that because I know that. And so if I want to do well going to Norway Trail or going to a world championship in Besson, for example, in the mountains, or going up and down mountains in Alpine Trail or Lecco Road or anything like that, I have to breed differently. I have to increase the size of my dogs. My dogs are around 50 pounds average. And they're very light bone. They are fast. They're endurant, but they probably will not be able to make 10 miles going up a mountain. And so it is a strategy that you have to put together. A great example is Egil Ellis, the champion of champions. I mean, he is the best of the best. The guy, he won many Onax, many Rondies, many Triple Crowns. Tok, I mean, his name is all over open class in Alaska. He takes his Alaskan dogs and he goes to Sweden, relocates, and it took him several years to get back to the groove of the Scandinavian racing and getting where he wanted to be at the top level again. So guys like him, we've been around long enough to know what it would take to win, and if you see it's not winning, then obviously you have to change it.
Okay, speed round pretty quickly since we're running out of time. First question, how much of mushing is you and how much of it is the dogs today?
What do you mean, me behind it? I'm a coach. I actually enjoy training way more than racing. I hate racing.
Okay.
I've raced so many years that I don't like the stress anymore, honestly. I don't stress anymore, realistically, because been there, done that so many years. But still, just the details of it, paying attention to this and that, waxing, making sure the right dog is on the right side, left dog is on the left side. But getting back to your question, I'm a coach, so especially in open class or even a 10-dog class, you're the manager. You sit behind the sled, you look at the pace, you look at the GPS, you look at every single tug lines. We don't kick or push or physically get involved as long as the race is. Obviously, you take the curves left and right and stuff like that, but it's not as physical as in 4-dog class or even 6-dog class. The dogs, they go through so many miles of training and routine that it becomes literally routine for that. So I would say 80% the dogs and 20% me.
Next question is, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years?
In 5 or 10 years, I don't know. So this year we bred a couple of breedings with Mari Horedo, and I'll have new blood coming. I have 9 puppies in my yard, which is a very small yard, believe it or not, and I'll have a total of 19 dogs, which is the most I ever owned in my life. And so for the next 4 or 5 years, we're going to be focusing probably in the 10, 8, and open, and depending if we have the depth, hit Rondi and Tokes and Onax.
So next one, where do you see the sport in 5 or 10 years?
That is a very interesting question. I hate to be doom and gloom, but unless if some of the leaders in our sport push promote our sports with different ways of promoting and different ways of doing, I think we're going to have a decline. I had a say was if you stay in this sport long enough, you'll win, because all the good guys are going to retire finally. And so we need more good guys. We need different ways to promote our sport. We need to bring the fun back. You and I, we always chat about, why the heck we don't have barbecues anymore? Why don't we have meet and greets anymore? Why don't we have,
the comfort in breakfast?
Comfort in breakfast anymore. Yes. We sit around and talk about dogs. Doesn't matter if it's a Siberian Husky, doesn't matter if it's a rec dog, doesn't matter if it's a GSP, Greyhound, whatever the heck it is. As long as you can have harness on it and pull, recreationally, competitively, it's a sled dog in my books. And we used to have long-lasting relationship. I have people I know for 30 plus years in Europe. As a matter of fact, I have friends coming from Belgium from 30 some years ago. We used to raise Siberian Huskies together, and those are the relationship. Then the part of the sport you want. Winning is winning. You come back home, you throw your trophy on the countertop, and you forget about it. Those long-lasting relationship, that's what we need to bring. We need to bring the fun factor to the race. New events, new activities, new symposiums, new blood.
And I think that goes for all classes, whether it be sprint class or distance class, Iditarod, whatever. That has to come back in order for this to go. So, KP, last question. It's the question I ask all of our guests. If a person came up to you and said, hey, I want to get involved in sprint mushing, what would you tell them?
I will say get yourself a mentor. A guy or girl, somebody who knows what they are doing and who you respect, not only because of their performances. A mentor doesn't need to be a champion. A mentor needs to be someone who is taking care of his or her animals correctly, the way that you would, and follow this person and don't switch back and forth. Or Joe said, I run my dogs 20 miles, and Jim said that I run my dogs 2 miles, and Julie said I run, the bicycle, 1 mile, whatever. Again, this mentor does not need to be a champion. This mentor needs to be someone who takes care of his dogs and is passionate about the sport.
There you go, guys. Kourosh Partow is our guest and our host. We hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a comment on what you think about our interview, and we will talk to you guys next time. Goodbye.
From First Paw Media, this is the Dog Driver Show. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you can see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Robert Forto and Kourosh Partow. Our producer is Robert Forto and created for First Paw Media.